I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil.
And all right, welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Reckless Musecast. Today we have Ignation and some guy named Ben. Ignation, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? You're a band, you're a duo. So tell us a little about yourselves.
Yeah, do you want to go first or I'll go first? I'm Zac. I sing and play bass, and kind of started as the main songwriter, but Tiff here, who has been rapping and playing drums, and also getting into singing. She's also been stepping into the role of songwriting as well. So we've been growing and expanding our roles and challenging the status quo of what you can do with just voices, bass, and drums. So.
Very cool. So how would you guys describe your style? And here, let me make it really hard for you guys. How would you describe your style without using any musical terms? Don't say, oh, like we're kind of a little bit of like pop and rock and punk and R&B. I don't use any of those terms. How would you describe it?
That is difficult.
Ooh. It was already hard with
I know,
yeah.
Okay, how about this? You can use conventional genre names now, but at the end of this podcast, I'll ask you, okay, like describe your style, but without musical terms now. But we're gonna go ahead and use conventional terms for now.
Okay. In essence, we pretty much fuse genres. So we'll mix like heavy rock, blues, R&B, rap, kind of with a little bit of a pop sensibility. We usually have a hard time when people ask us like what genre we play and stuff like that. We're like, we just kind of mix everything. Kind of have to just listen and see for yourself. And every time people come to our show, they always end up going afterwards to us and saying like, yeah, you're right. I have no idea what genre to put you guys in. So
hey, you should take pride in that.
There's some pride there.
Yeah. So one thing that Ben and I really like about you guys is that you're not afraid to publicly question, a lot of what the media is putting out, and it's cool because you guys aren't like, you're not explicitly political. You're not out there being we're pro this side or that side or we're against this, but you're sort of like, think for yourself. Like, don't be afraid to push the boundaries and think outside the box. Was that intentional? Did you guys like really try to infuse your music with that, or was that just sort of like your personalities and it kind of grew into that, or what?
I would say I guess you can kind of say it's intentional. I mean, the
band
has to do, the band has to do with our personalities, and so in a way, it's, I guess you can say it's both. But I mean, like, if you go to like the bios of our band pages and stuff like that, part of the description is saying like, like questioning, like kind of encouraging people to question things and question limitations and all that kind of stuff. So like, a lot of the themes in our songs has to do with like human conditions, has to do with questioning, what is the status quo, kind of some of the things that you said of getting people to think for themselves, to to form their own opinions instead of going with the crowd. So I guess you can say it's a little bit of both.
It's kind of I think, and we have some stuff in the works. 2020 kind of brought out a little bit more of the social political aspect of us, but the whole time too, way in the beginning, before it was even like Ignation, and I was just writing new songs and stuff coming out of another project. The challenge of the status quo was kind of on an internal level of giving people permission to feel things that they would rather not feel but are very natural, or like one of the songs, there was a line in one of our older songs, it's on our EP, the line says, cry those tears you hide, and So even on like an individual level, we've encouraged that aspect of it, and part of it's from personal experience too, of going through struggles. And for me as a writer, it's kind of like I'll go through things, and then I kind of like zoom out on it, and instead of talking about my specific situation, I kind of zoom out and go, okay, like where's this silver lining? Like there's a silver lining in a situation that, like, okay, this my particular situation has my face on it, but you know, I'm sure, you know, is there, where's the human element of this, where any human being on planet Earth could understand in a general sense of like this type of scenario happening, or experiencing these feelings, or avoiding those the temptation to avoid those feelings, and now you need to get through it and feel it. So it was kind of always had that sort of a vibe going on, especially with the lyrics. And then with current events and everything, it's kind of just kind of spider webbed out into taking that same mindset and approach with the social political stuff. And you know, we will dabble in speaking out, you know, on our individual pages. We're definitely more outspoken about stuff, to where it's like, yeah, no, think for yourself, like ask the questions, you know.
What are some specifics that's like made you want to speak out more, or think like that other people should be, other artists should be speaking out more and not censoring themselves?
I would say just the idea of censorship in itself.
Yeah,
that's a big one. You know, a lot of people are trying to silence voices that they disagree with. You know, that's a huge one. It's like, okay, everyone's allowed to have different opinions. You don't have to like it, but like everyone is allowed to have different opinions.
Do you get that? Do you get that from other? I mean, you tour and obviously do shows where you're not the only band. Do you ever catch flack, or does anyone like do you ever get the sense that you should be censoring yourself, or other artists are censoring themselves, like from those artists, like not just fans, but other musicians?
We've definitely met people who have censored themselves and who won't say things, you know, like they'll say it to us in a private conversation, but they won't say it on, you know, their music pages or stuff like that. So there's definitely people who censor themselves. I don't think we've really been in any situations where we felt the need to censor ourselves.
Yeah, I can't think of anything where we felt the need to censor ourselves, or we had another, you know, band or artist tell us like, hey, you shouldn't do that.
What about just like artists kind of, do you ever notice that some will just take the position because it seems it's like the popular thing to do at that time? Like I always think of whether they meant it or not, like there used to be a whole like free Tibet movement. It was very 90s, like Rage Against the Machine and everything. Like, I can't remember the last time anyone did a free Tibet thing. Like, no one, I bet most people don't even know what Tibet is. That was very big, like in the 90s. It was a very big thing, and you can't, like, Tibet didn't go away. Like, it's still there. It's still occupied by China. I mean, that's my position, but like it was just something very fashionable at the time. Like, do you see that now? That, I mean, there's a handful of probably 20, I'd say like probably post 2016 positions that I feel like a lot of artists, they don't actually believe these things necessarily. I'm not saying they necessarily believe the opposite, or a contradictory view, a different view, but they just say because it's a popular stance to take. Do you ever witness any of that?
Oh yeah. Like
yeah, I think the big thing, I'm gonna at risk of poking at one particular side, I'll try to be as delicate as possible. But
we are hardcore. This is hardcore, not delicate.
So the big thing I've noticed, I've a lot, the majority of artists and musicians that I've come across have the tendency to be like left wing or a lot, somewhat allied to the Democrat Party, either because they actually have left leaning views, or that's kind of the assumed thing.
Yeah, the default,
The
assumed
default,
default
yeah.
artist.
So the big thing I noticed was this going back, like the Obama era, like Obama's first term and everything. All these people that were anti-George W. All these musicians I knew that were anti-George W. and were all about Obama because they were anti-war. And then I follow back up with have conversations with some of these same musicians, and we're into Obama's second term. I'm like, hey, what do you think about Syria? And then they're kind of like, and I'm like, Obama's doing like,
like they're full of it. They're so full of it. It's one of the biggest. I think that's one of the biggest examples of like there was so much anti-war mid 2000s music, System of a Down, what Rise Against, like these bands that their whole like quintessence, like the quintessence of their music was this like anti-war, and then Obama gets elected. And they just kind of like fizzled away. Like they record and stop then. If anything, a lot of them, that war in Afghanistan just ended. Like, but all that went away because it wasn't the popular thing to do because you're going against the young cool president. And it's a shame because I think don't get me wrong, some did, but they're the minority, and I give them a lot more credit because they stuck to their values.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, especially the last couple of years, like we've been living through very tumultuous times and dealing with, it seems like there are a lot of things that for some reason start with the letter P that just kind of dominate like some of these culture conversations. So it's like pandemics, police, power, privilege, like just all these dumb, stupid words that start with the letter P. It's just, I don't know what it is. But some of the art that has come out, and when I say art, I mean very broadly, so not just fine arts, I mean just music, film, literature, etc. There's been some really interesting things that have come out of it that reacting to these tumultuous times, and there's a lot of it that's been really obnoxious. I don't think we're gonna get like a really good grasp of like how artists responded to the times until like at least a decade from now. It's always interesting to kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, after 9/11, horror movies became really popular again because people were fascinated by, the atrocities that humans could commit to each other. But we didn't realize that at the time. It was sort of like this sort of thing. So I'm curious about like when we look back on these times, be like, oh, that's what was going through our minds, like because like you're so up in it at the time, and it's just like a fire hose of just nonsense and craziness. And then you go back and these are the things that were kind of dominating artists' minds at the time. Like so I mean, like, is there anything that you think right now is and I know like I'm kind of reverse coursing on this, but like, is there anything right now that specifically that you guys are concerned with and how that plays out in your music?
I like the peas thing. That's interesting. That's interesting. I'm still like wrapping my head around. I mean, the biggest concern, even before 2020. So like, it's weird. I kind of I went down this rabbit hole. And what was it, about end of 2017 with Jordan Peterson? I started binge watching Jordan Peterson stuff on YouTube. I don't even remember how I came across him. But he was just like, he turned into like the biggest rock star for me. It seemed that way. He found me. I'm like, oh. But his whole thing, I think it was since 2016 or 2017 with the bill C-16 in Canada. And his big point, and I really agree with this, is like, without free speech, if we can't talk about it, then we're going to be really in trouble. Like, then we can't really, you can't even discuss what needs to change or what doesn't need to change, or share different perspectives. So that's kind of the concerning thing to me about, I think first and foremost is the free speech aspect of, and it's odd to me too, because even like with censorships or platforms and stuff, you look at somebody like, Alex Jones is like probably the biggest one that's been censored a lot because, he's put in the conspiracy theory camp. But I think, whether you like him or not, I think somebody like him, it's almost because he's censored, then people that are drawn to that type of a thing are going to be
Yeah,
like, well,
100%.
if what he's saying isn't true, then why are they stopping him? You know,
Right. It's
where
the Streisand effect, right?
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, exactly. The Streisand. Yeah, it's like, so I don't know how. I think that part of what we believe in is like impacting the culture, and we believe music is a good way to a way to do that. There's many ways that the culture is made up of many different things, but to impact the culture, to start allowing people to speak again. Because it should be a battle of ideas. I think that's the idea of Western civilization is like, hey, our ideas should go to battle, not us.
Right.
And that's something even too. It's not easy, and I'm learning that as a human being individually. Like, well, it's interesting with this lineup of the band here. Like, even we'll talk about musical things, and I'll write some stuff, and I'll have some ideas that are corny and cheesy because there was a segment of my life where I binged on like 70s funk and fusion, and it's like some of that stuff can come off as corny for what we're trying to do. So she'll tell me like, hey, you should take that out, like get it. And I'm like, what do you mean? Blah, blah, blah. We have to like kind of duke out the ideas and realize like, hey, no, this is my bandmate, and she's got ideas too, and we both have the same common goal of like we want our music to be as impactful and the best we can make it. So she's not like dissing me personally. She just doesn't like this little like 70s inspired funk line that I tried to like wedge in there, like a square peg in a round hole kind of a
right.
But, so I can understand where people get touchy over ideologies too, especially if you're really deeply invested in them.
No, especially with like the current trend of like identity and everything. They put their identity into their ideology.
Yeah.
So like you insult the ideology, you insult their identity.
Right. I guess that's the other thing too. Identity politics is really that's a slippery slope and a trap in and of itself, because then it's like people are and that gets me more on a philosophical end. I think the biggest thing is people are so hung up on now. I feel like people nowadays are so hung up on what they are,
right,
instead of focusing on who they are.
Yes.
What you are is kind of like, hey, that you're whatever, my ancestry, my genetics, my all of that. That's the hand that nature dealt me. Like,
right.
I mean, now with modern science, like, yeah, I could maybe try to alter that, but instead it's like, what about my character? What about working on strengths in my, amplifying strengths in my personality,
right?
And mitigating weaknesses. Those are things that are actually doable that every human being can do, but
Yeah, exactly. I mean, being born with a certain skin color or hair color or height, that's not an achievable thing. Like, that's just how you are. Like, that's not something that you strive towards, really. That reminds me. So that actor who died recently, was it Sidney Poitier, I think?
Yeah, Sidney Poitier.
Yeah, and there's a great clip of him that I posted on Twitter recently, where it was like in the mid to late 60s, and he was a famous black actor, and he was basically saying like, I'm going to kind of butcher it a little bit, but basically what he was saying is like, look, every time I get interviewed, I get asked about my blackness, but that's only one part of me. Ultimately, I'm an actor, I'm an artist, I'm an American, I'm a man. Give me the respect in those regards. Like, stop talking to me about the color of my skin. Stop asking me questions about those riots. I'm here. I'm an actor. Talk to me about that. And I tweeted out basically saying, like, this is something that every artist, every creative person can learn from, because like that's something, like you said, like that's something that you can work towards. You can become a better artist. You can become a better musician, a better songwriter, a better poet, better painter. And those are the things that I think are more impactful in terms of who you are, rather than just, I was born in this neighborhood with this skin color, with this gender. Okay, fine, but you couldn't help that. Like, that's not, I don't care about that. Like, what are you doing right now? What are you working on right now? Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah, if you just focus on identity, you get Kamala Harris. So it hasn't really worked out for them.
So somebody pointed out it's like how vapid do you have to be like, my race is the most important thing about me. It's you have a really boring, stupid life then.
even she like managed to butcher her own. She did, the whole. First of all, she put. I don't mean to go on a Kamala Harris rant here, but she put a bunch of young men in prison for weed, and then she jokes about smoking weed as a Jamaican, and then her dad's like, "That's a harmful stereotype. Like that's bullshit. We don't like all do that." Like, so she even managed to offend like her own like part of her own background. That's just how incompetent she is. She couldn't even do the identity part right. But anyway, I don't know. You guys could be fans of her. I don't like her. She just represents everything that's like wrong with with politics right now.
I'd agree.
I strongly agree. Well, that's the thing too. I had a conversation with my youngest brother. He's a drummer, but I was telling him about like shows I've done. Feeling like, as a sideman, as a bass player, a little over like, between 10 and 15 years ago now, there was a span where I was playing a lot of urban gospel gigs and a lot of playing for rappers. And in those environments, I was the only white guy.
Right.
And, and I was telling him like, putting the shoe on the other foot, so to speak, it's like, I would hope that I got those gigs because like as a bass player, I can groove and I can play that music well enough to get the call and have those gigs, not because they needed a token white boy. Like, you know what I mean? Because I would, so I think applying that when you're talking about like actors and stuff where it's like all they're talking about is, skin color and their background, it's like, it's almost, I could imagine it being a weird scenario where it's like, hey, like, don't you want to talk about like the acting, the work I did, what I brought to, as an individual, what I brought to the table, not like just, the genetic coding I happen to have and the upbringing,
To me, I don't understand why more people, people of color aren't offended in the other way, because like to me, and I know some people are, because I've had conversations like this with people, but it's like, when I'm being like accepted into a school or given a job or something because I'm a minority, like okay, I think that's kind of insulting to me. Like I can't get in just based off of my abilities, like
right. Well, exactly, and it's got to be really obnoxious where it's just sort of like, tell us about your experience as a woman of color. And it's like, okay, but I'm a drummer. I spend more time drumming than I do think about my whatever. It's just like, let's talk music. Like, but I know it's an obnoxious thing because we're definitely seeing the way that identity politics is impacting art and pop culture. And now it's basically a lot of it is propaganda. It's more about lecturing the audience rather than, connecting with your audience, which I think is kind of like, the opposite of what art should do.
Yeah.
What did you guys, so did you set out to create a band without, what would it be, like a lead guitarist or like, because you just have a bass and drums and singing, right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting choice. And what made you decide to go that route? I mean, it sounds great. I listened to a bunch of your songs on Spotify, and it's unique because at least the other, what are some of the duo, like the White Stripes? They were a duo, right? But they had a lead guitar and drums.
Tenacious
D. Well, they only had guitars, right? So
it's Royal Blood that does bass and drums.
Well,
So what made you go that way?
So it kind of happened to us. So actually, depending, like if it was the our EP on Spotify before we start, that actually does have guitar on it. So
okay.
As a lot of bands go through lineup changes, this band is definitely not an exception. We've gone through a lot of them. Touring, actually, we found out like touring will do that. You go on some low budget tours. So there's a tour that I got to give a shout out. There's a tour that's really special to us called the Extreme Tour. Nonprofit group, check them out. They do some great things. So they're cool because they're kind of a boot camp for bands and musicians. So usually anytime we had a lineup change, you know, I would get the band to work, we'd get our stuff together, and then I would try to at least go out for 2 weeks on the Extreme Tour. And from 2016 to 2018, we ended up having a lineup change like almost immediately after coming off the road with the Extreme Tour. And the thing is like touring's not for everybody, and it's kind of like if you've never been on tour before, you get this like fantasized thing about it, but then you get the rigors of the road, and then you're like, oh, okay, you know. The first time I went out, we were doing laundry, and I'm watching my clothes spin in the washer, and I'm like, oh, I get it now. You know, because I used to, when I was younger, I would see these pop stars, and you know, I see these pop stars and stuff, and I go, man, I know singers that are so much better than them, like at local churches. I know musicians, and you know, I know musicians and singers at gospel churches that can like roll up all those musicians and like eat them for lunch. Like, why, you know, why are these people, you know, on tour doing the big stages and stuff? And, you know, these people that I know personally that are monster musicians, like never leave their hometown. And then years, like 10 years later, I'm staring at the laundry going, I'm like, oh, you know, and it's like my laundry's going, and I'm like relieved because I got my first shower in like 4 days, and you know. And,
I was actually going to ask you about the shower. I'm while as Joe knows, and I display many times, I was actually displaying before we started recording my Sardaukar voice, which I think is excellent. I don't know if you guys know that reference from Dune, the throat singer in Dune. I also display my screamo abilities very often on this podcast, but I'm not a musician by any means. But I did backpack before. I backpacked Europe before, and the showers are, I would call them hostile showers. And it's all cracks and crevices, because you got to really save your soap. And is that the same on tour? Are you really just getting the pits and behind the knees and other places, or are you able to get a full lather?
Sometimes it depends on the situation. Like, we had some really cool situations where we like get to stay, you know, where we've stayed with people, and it's like you actually get to use a shower in a house. And then there's other times where it's like, you know, you got 20 minutes out of YMCA, go. And then like parking took up 5 of those 20 minutes. And you're like, you know, you know. But yeah, so for us, what happened, you know, we were having lineup changes and everything, and most of the time we've been a 3-piece, and then we were a 4-piece for a little while, and then 2018 we had like kind of the most changes. So my brother was the original guitar player, and he kind of like, we could try to tell like he just wasn't into it anymore. And we ended up having a conversation. It was like, hey, it seems like, you know, and then he was kind of like, yeah, I think I need to do something different. And we're like, okay, cool. And then we had a friend of ours join, and he was excited, and he jumped right in, and we were doing rehearsals, and everything was going great. And then about a week before a 2-month tour, he's like, hey guys, I didn't think this through properly. I got he got like cold feet, and then he like pulled out. And he was nice about it, and very respectful about it. We're still friends, you know, to this day. And you know, so it gave me a week, and then I realized, you know, we were still going to go do the tour. And so I'm racking my brain. I'm like, well, I play guitar too. And I was telling Tiff, I'm like, well, I could play our stuff on guitar. Maybe I should track. We should play with tracks. And she's like, I don't think that's a good fit for us. And she's like, I think you're supposed to do like what you do, like at open mics and like with worship and stuff like that. And I would play this way where some songs I would do like chords on the bass, and I would spread them out, and I would just accompany my voice. And I'm like, well, that's a whole nother way to play. Like, I don't know if I can get it together. And I thought about it. I was like, all right. And then the next morning I woke up, and as I was warming up to go in to teach, the ideas started coming in, and fortunately we only had for that tour we only had like a 25-minute set.
Yeah.
So the ideas came. I was like, okay, cool, we can do this, and we did a handful of rehearsals and put it together and got out, and then it was a hit. Like people really liked it. And I guess the difference like between us and like the White Stripes, or like what I'm doing with my rig, I do a split path, but like with the White Stripes and with like Royal Blood, they usually just do an octave.
Octave pedal.
Like an octave pedal, either up or down. Like so,
Right.
the guy from Royal Blood, he does an octave up, and then that goes into a guitar rig, and then like Jack White or
Did
another
octave below, yeah.
yeah, and then into a bass rig, or like another great Miyavi, Japanese artist. He has an octave pedal, and he has it going into a bass rig, and it's just him and a drummer.
Right.
So instead of doing that, mainly because I only had a week and I was broke, couldn't do
Octave
that.
pedals aren't cheap. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I couldn't like just go out and do that, and like and we were in a little sedan too that we toured in. So it's like I'm not gonna bring 2 amps, and I'm not gonna but I realized like chord voicing, so I just started doing I did have like some fuzz and overdrive pedals and stuff like that on my board, and so I would just use the fuzz pedals and the wah stuff, and then I would
And you
just
have the 6-string bass too, should be mentioned.
yeah, so I do play a
extra
6-string
strings.
bass. So I
Okay,
got
cool.
one higher and one lower than your typical 4. So
Yeah.
I was able to just do the chord voicings.
Very cool. So
and
you
then
were
with
able,
the voice,
you guys
too.
managed to find a way to like fill in that sonic space that other
Yeah.
band members would usually try to would fill
Right,
in.
exactly. Yeah. Either with harmony, by using harmony knowledge or and effects. So the other cool thing is like fuzz and distortion actually adds harmonic content. So sometimes if you got something fuzzed out,
Right.
you can hear some of those overtones, and it kind of makes it sound a little more harmonious than it normally would.
Right.
Then part of it too is strategizing. That's where like learning all the voice leading stuff in college, and even like with one of my mentors studying music, I started rearranging stuff like, oh, if I'm singing this note, I'm going to play, make it so that the vocal melodies that I'm singing and the bass lines are harmonizing with each other, and not too many doubling. And that helps fill out the chords. So it's almost like has this sonic effect where you almost hear a third voice even though it doesn't exist.
Right. Right.
So that's where it's like it was a little more unique, I think, because most of those 2-piece bands would kind of just like take a more primitive approach, which is cool too.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I love the Royal Blood sound. Actually, they sound it's they're 2-piece, but they sound like a wicked tight 3-piece. With the riffs and stuff like
Right.
like Little Monsters and stuff like that. It's like so cool.
So do you think that the fact that you guys are a duo, like that kind of impacted the overall sound? Because I mean, like like you said, like other duos, they might take more like stripped down primitive sound, whereas you guys are like, no, like let's find a way to like get a big sound. Like the fact that you're doing like that has actually impacted like the sort of genre and style that you've played. I mean, like it's really cool hearing stories about how what would seem like a challenge or a problem actually ends up creating like a new, like something even better than you would have done before.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what happened with us. The cool thing too that was a real blessing in disguise for us, and made it a challenge initially, was like I had friends in the industry and stuff critique back when we were 4-piece. I was sending demos because when we were 4-piece, I had some monster musicians with me, like just I had a ridiculous drummer and my brothers no slouch on guitar, and we had another guitar player too that was ridiculously good. So my brother was doing all these cool chord voicings, and the other guitar player could play all these crazy shreddy leads, and he could slap and tap on the guitar, and then the drummer could play any genre. And the critique I got, and it was almost it was a little discouraging. I sent it to a trusted friend that's in the industry and works with different labels and stuff. He just was like, the problem is like you're getting an ice cream sundae, and it's got all these amazing toppings on it, but there's barely any ice cream at the bottom. And I was like, oh, and he was like, dude, you got to write a better. It's like, you guys are great players, but you got to write a better song. And I was like, oh, you know, so at the time I was trying to get all these amazing players, and we were all collaborating and stuff, and, you know, jamming and putting stuff together. And he goes, yeah, it sounds like you guys like just jammed on something, thought it was cool, and then you slapped lyrics and a vocal melody on top. And I laughed. I was like, that's exactly how we did it. And he's like, yeah, no, don't do that. Like, get back to writing songs. So with this arrangement, because we're limited instrumentally, like we can't throw all these layers on just willy-nilly. Like we have to, it has to be a good song to start with. Otherwise it's not going to carry. Like it's just not going to. So it forced us to improve songwriting.
Right.
Are you habitual writers or more like inspirational? Like,
I'm definitely inspirational writer, so I'll just, you know, I can go, you know, for like a couple months or something not writing anything, and then all of a sudden I get, you know, an idea. Through you know, later 2020 and 2021 we wrote a lot. I was getting like ideas all over the place, particularly because of a lot of the political stuff that was happening, and because, you know, not going out as much.
I was gonna say, did the lockdowns, like for a band, did it give you just time to jam?
Not so much to jam, but to songwrite. Just
Yeah.
to, like, you know, just getting ideas, working out, you know, like getting melody ideas or lyric ideas. But usually I start off with lyric ideas, and then we'd sit together and work out melodies and the instrumentation and all of that kind of stuff.
So that's where I'm learning too, because from the time I was a teenager, I was more, I was the opposite. I would start with music and then add my like melody and lyrics. So it would always be kind of like I would loop a chord progression or something or a riff, and it would just make me feel some kind of way. And then I would kind of hear a melody that, you know, made me that, you know, a melody that would try to encapsulate that feeling. And then I would sit and have to analyze, okay, well, what is that feeling? And then it would, like, the lyrics would start to pour in. And sometimes that's good. You know, I've had some good songs come out that way, but then I've also had some disjointed songs come out that way, because I think part of it, because I've like tried a bunch of different genres. So sometimes like, I would play something that has a totally different, the feel of what I'm playing has a very little to no association to what the lyrics I wrote, you know, and I've had to learn to dial that in. So I've been actually learning from her process. So I almost do an extra step where I'll jam on an idea and I try not to get married to that idea and just stick with the melody and the lyrics, and then the accompaniment chords or the riff or the arrangement, I'll just pull that right out from underneath it and reconstruct after I got that lyric and melody. So I do that extra step now, but I think I'm a little bit more on I'm still inspirational myself, like over habitual, but I've been taking like tactics of like the craft of songwriting, like that pop songwriters use and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to apply that to kind of reel myself in, because I'll once I get inspired and once I get going on stuff, I never really seem to have a lack of ideas, but it's more of like, okay, I need restraints so that I can actually push something through. Otherwise, I'll try to just throw too many ingredients in and just keep going and be like, well, what if this or what if that? Where having that, at least having some kind of formulaic structure, kind of keeps it functional. Otherwise, you know, it could be
it'll never be finished.
It would never be finished. Yeah, it would just be like, and it's a relief too, actually, using the pop song, for me, using like the pop song writing method, because sometimes like one of the big things, it's hinged off of what patterns that actually feel natural to us. So we tend to, at least in Western music, Indian music is they can do some weird phrasing stuff and make it feel natural. And I still can't quite wrap my head around it.
Well, they have a 22 note octave though, don't they? In Indian music?
There's some like they have the microtonal scales and stuff, and it's just like it's weird. And then their timing too, a lot of their time signatures, they'll do these metric modulations.
Oh, okay.
Like so instead of having like for us, like we'll stick to a time signature usually, and then it's phrases are usually in multiples of 2, like a 2-bar phrase, 4-bar phrase.
Right.
Like the pop song progression for a lot of pop songs, it's a 4-bar intro, 16-bar first verse, a 2-bar pre-chorus, an 8-bar chorus.
Yep.
Then your second verse is half the length of your first verse. 8-bar 8-bar second verse, 2-bar pre-chorus, then back to that 8-bar chorus, and then you got your bridge. So that formula, for me now, it's like I give myself permission to not have to stick to it, but like if I use that as the template, then it keeps me from overloading. Like, hey, maybe my first verse might be too long, or I get to the second verse and I'm like, oh shoot. I'm out of ideas, but then it's like, oh well, it's only 8 bars. You only need half the amount. So maybe take that extra from the extra points that you had in the first verse, and you can move them over to the second and fill it out, and then balance it. So we keep that and bear that in mind, but we're not necessarily like latched down to those things either. So like a lot of the stuff we're writing, like our demo that we have up on YouTube, Ghost to Heroes, that one we broke away from a lot of that stuff. We had we kind of had this balancing act where we were keeping the form in mind, but then realizing like, oh, okay, this for the purposes of these lyrics and how this whole song and story unfolds, like there's it's not like a #1 radio hit formula thing, but hopefully it's like at least has enough catchy elements to where it's accessible enough to where people listening to it can connect with the message.
Right. Do you guys ever find yourselves in situations where you have what you think is a really good idea, but you're also kind of like, yeah, but I don't know if the audience would dig it. Like it might be a little too out there. Or do you just kind of like, yeah, let's just go for it. Let's try it. Let's see where it goes.
That's how I feel about this podcast show. I think it's a good idea, but I don't know if the audience is going to dig it. It's not funny. I'm serious.
It's serious laughter.
I feel like
you can be like, yeah, we have some ideas, and just like the world's not ready for them yet.
Yeah, I feel like we tend to not worry too much about it, like because we do write with what he was talking about, with a little bit of that pop structure. We do know that most of our stuff does have elements that most people are going to be into to some degree, but like I feel like when we do have like an out there kind of idea, kind of like what the one song that he was mentioning, we're not really, I don't feel like we get too worried about it, because I guess the way that we kind of look at it is like, even if it's just like a tiny amount of people who like that song, like then that song is for those tiny amount of people. Like,
Sure. Yeah. or sometimes like I don't know, you might not realize how many people actually do enjoy something. I'm like I said, I'm not a musician, but I'm a writer, and I just write books that or short stories that I know I like, and I think I'm doing it for I'm not doing it for a certain demographic, just people who might enjoy it, and that's why I put it out there. And a lot of times I realize that more people like it than I expected. I wrote a book that is like very kind of, I don't know if it's niche, but it's like about the Greek god in New Orleans, and it's by far my most popular book because it's just like, because it's so focused on like one kind of area, and I do happen to market it on the Reddit Greek mythology page. So it's like, that's where people, that's what they like, and I'm like, oh, that I don't need to write the next bestseller. You don't need to make the next big top chart 100 pop song. Like, enough people will like it, and they'll tell their friends and their family members, and people will be like, oh, I didn't think I would even like this, but I do.
Yeah. And I really admire, artists who just have like the confidence to be like, yeah, I know it's weird or it's a little out there, but let's just do it anyway. One of my favorite stories, I'm really into classical music. Beethoven was known for breaking a lot of rules, and nowadays, like, the rules that he broke are considered very stuffy. But there was a story of how he was composing some symphony or something, and he showed the sheet music to a friend of his, and they found some parallel fifths in it. And at the time, during the common practice, parallel fifths is like a huge sin.
No.
And then so somebody told him, like, oh, parallel fifths, you're not allowed to do that. And then he just goes, I admit it. And it's like, like he waves his hand, and like, now that's not seen as like a rebellious. I mean, that's what power chords are. It's just, this is parallel fifths. But it's like, I just love when an artist is like, nah, it's fine. I'm doing it anyway. I think that's really in short supply these days. So that's cool that you guys aren't, you're willing to kind of like push the boundaries a little bit, and like, this is weird, but let's go for it. Let's see if the audience digs it.
I think one thing we've learned from I don't know, 2020 to now, I do think there's a market for authenticity. I think that's why certain podcasts have taken off, certain shows. I don't know, just I don't know what to call them, cult people in culture or bands or whatever it is, because I think the high point for a lot of the fluff bullshit was in the 2020s, and a lot of people got quote unquote like red pilled. And they saw a lot of the crap, and they are rolling their eyes at all of the preachiness and the PC stuff. That then, PC is the kind of innocent form of it, like censorship becomes the more nefarious form of it. And I do think that there's a market for authenticity, and especially with music, I feel like there's almost as you three are musicians, I don't know if you like this necessarily, but there is kind of a gatekeeping thing to music where people really love like there's almost a dopamine release of telling someone about a new band who they don't know about. Like, I feel like we all have those bands, and I think that's kind of cool. But I think that's very unique to bands or to music. But I do think that the market craves, or our culture is craving, authenticity as a correction to all of the crap we've been fed for so long throughout like the 2010s and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with a few different artists, not even, just in music, but, in acting and writing, just various arts, pretty much all saying the same thing, saying that like, there's a craving for authenticity right now.
Yeah. I think I'm very critical of a lot of tech. A lot of people are now. It's not really a very rebellious thing to do anymore. But I think one of the good things about Twitter and Instagram, especially during COVID, was a lot of people were exposed, whether they were politicians or celebrities in their hot tubs telling you to stay home, or politicians going through their sorbet refrigerators, as in that's the only thing they have in their refrigerator because they have so many refrigerators, and telling you to stop. Obviously, I'm talking about Nancy Pelosi here. And I think it exposed a lot of these lizards into like what they really are, and people are like, wait a minute, these are the people who are passing our laws and making our culture. Like, no, I need something more real.
Yeah, that's actually that topic that you brought up too is like that one of the songs I wrote in 2020 is about that very thing.
The sorbet refrigerator?
Not specifically, but just that behavior from politicians. It's like a satire kind of a song.
Pelosi starts with a P.
We have to use this P idea in a song.
Yeah.
The only thing colder than her heart is her sorbet fridge.
Oh man, we know there's something almost paradoxical about being personal, like through your art. Like, it seems like the more personal and authentic you are, the more relatable you are. Which you think in some ways it would kind of be the exact opposite in a way, where it's like, I'm going to write about something that's bland and that everybody knows what it is. It's just sort of like, but it's like, that's not hitting me where where I want to. Whereas, like, if I'm going to talk about an experience that happened to me, then other people are going to be like, you know, that's happened to me too, or I've known people that's happened to me too. Is that something that you guys strive for? Your authenticity, where it's like, yeah, that's a little too superficial, that's a little too surface level. Let's dig a little deeper and find something that would really resonate. Is that a big part of your writing process?
Oh yeah, that's like probably a
Like,
main focus
Yeah,
in
I was gonna say,
our
it's like
writing.
the process.
Yeah.
I was not to backtrack too much too, and I think like we, with the collaboration between us now, I think we balance each other out as far as like trying stuff that's, you know, maybe weird or not. So like, as a writer, I would say Tiff is more exploratory as like as a lyricist and as a writer, where for me as a songwriter, I'm more like with the structure. I like symmetry. I like, you know, I get a little more orderly when I'm actually like writing song structure. But then as a player and a singer, I get a little bit more exploratory. You know, sometimes I can be too busy, or I can just try to do weird things and force fit them to where she's very more like, hey, does it serve the song? If it doesn't serve the song, just don't do it. You know, only play with. So kind of on a musical end, she'll keep me in check, and then it's almost like on the structure end and the songwriter end, you know, I try to keep her in check a little bit, but we end up, you know, not entirely. It's not like we don't have like hard parameters on each other, but we do kind of push that back and forth, and I think that gives it, you know, within the realm of expression and stuff, where we find the overlap of stuff that we both, okay, that sounds good, that, you know, that feels good, that sounds good, yep, that's what we want to say, you know, then we have that kind of confidence to put it out. The other thing, Ben, we were talking about that niche market. Have you ever heard the concept? I don't know who originally came up with the concept. The concept of 1,000 fans.
Oh yeah.
Oh
No,
yeah,
I've never heard that. Is
Yeah.
that like a Malcolm Gladwell thing?
it was a tech guy back in like 2007.
Yeah,
It was an article that he wrote, I think.
Really?
Yeah, he was from Silicon Valley, I think, and basically his thing was sort of like, if you develop a product or a service, design it just for like 100 people, like people who will subscribe to it and will be your biggest fans, because then they'll tell 10 people, and then, you know, it'll your market will start to expand. But instead of like, I'm going to design something that 10 million people will like, no, start with 100 people, just focus on them, because then they'll be your evangelist and they'll promote you and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I like that. I feel like I have to do less work now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because then you're focusing too, and you're focusing on that, you know, that initial 100 people. Then it's like it's a more specified thing in a niche that like you can do, you know, the best that you can do. Like our friend that's a music industry guy, the one that I'd sent the demo to, he was doing a talk, and he was like, you know, he brought up like just a weird example. He's like, yeah, if you're a polka band. Like if you're a polka band, you're trying to get 1 million fans, then you're gonna have to like pop everything out. And then what's gonna happen is you're not gonna be like, polka fans aren't gonna like what you're doing that much. Where if you're a polka band, you're better off just being as polka as you can be, and really like hit that as hard as you can, so you get the diehard polka fans, and then build it from there.
I would say it's probably been even like, I mean, how many, especially with love songs, like how many of those were written for one person, and they're some of the most famous songs ever written, and they're literally for one person, or I mean, that's music. And then for books, I remember this really popular book called The Shack. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's it's a novel that a guy wrote, self-published, literally to hand out to his family for Christmas. Like he had no desire to ever sell it, and it's like one of the best, most popular. It was on like a PBS did this whole thing called The Great American Read, and it was like the top 100 most popular books in America, and it was like on this list, and the guy literally did it to give out to Christmas for his family, and it became this phenomenon, and they told people, and now it obviously is traditionally published, but that's how it started.
Yeah, it's like before I moved to LA to try to get into the entertainment industry. I was working in the Silicon Valley tech scene, and so like I got to work with a lot of early stage startups, and almost all of them would, like, when they first started out, it was like, my product is for, like one of the things that we always taught people is, like, when you're designing product, be super specific in terms of who you want to attract. Don't just be like, but of course there would be startups who be like, okay, like my product is for millennials.
Yeah.
Besides like Nazi and fascist and social, like millennials is the most misused term in culture. Like everyone below like 65 is called millennial. Like, you guys don't know what that word means. Stop using it.
I almost feel bad for Gen X and Gen Z.
Gen X, I think Gen X kind of revels in it. They kind of love being ignored. That's like their whole shtick. Like they love just being like, whatever. There was some funny tweet that was like, Gen Xers get a lot of, I know us Gen Xers get a lot of hate, but I mean, we were kind of right about everything. like everything sucks. We were kind of right about everything. Everything's lame, whatever. Are you guys...
So, who's your audience? Who's your target audience? Don't say millennials. I swear to God, I'll end this podcast.
I was going to say, Joe, we didn't know market research. For this podcast, my target audience was 45-year-old white suburban moms. I don't know if you had the same idea.
Yeah, I did.
That's where I'm going with this. Wine moms. Always remember this: the wine mom giveth, and the wine mom taketh away. Like, that is in politics and in all things. They literally control our culture. MSNBC watching wine moms. They will change an entire suburb in the blink of an eye.
Isn't it weird? Like, on a weird tangent, like, isn't it weird that like both the left and the right hate white women?
Well, they can be the saviors, and literally it's like or they can be like, they are the reason that this person won.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny, the woke hate white women because, like, well, you're white, you're privileged, and you don't know what it's like to be a minority, blah blah blah. But then the right hates white women because, like, all this woke stuff's because of you. So it's sort of like it's like
they're the ones who are like hiring DEI diversity. Yeah. I call it DIE because I wish it would. And they're the ones who are like hiring all of these like people to just come yell at them at a dinner party. I call them privileged. It's the equivalent of like the flagellants during the plague, like whipping themselves on the back. Like, tell me again that I don't get it. Like, I'm into it though. I like those kind of parties. I'm into that kind of stuff, but it's not for everyone.
I forgot who was interviewing. There was an interview with Ted Cruz I saw like sometime last year. Ted Cruz is actually bringing that up and talking about Texas and saying how Texas could be closer to being a swing state than Ohio. And he was saying that because he said for years and years you would have the cities that were blue, but then the suburbs, he said they basically were red donuts, and he's like, now those donuts are turning purple because of the wine moms.
Yes,
because they tend to go west.
Got to win over the wine moms. Yeah, they will spread a rumor. Like, no, they will ruin your life with a rumor. I grew up amongst many of them. I was just like kind of peeking through. My friend go to my friend's house and just like peek through their ferns. It's just like a bunch of wine moms there. It's 4:00. The Chardonnay is out. They don't cook, but they don't work, but they have maids anyway to do all the cooking.
So is that your demographic then?
That's my demographic. Our guests who were interviewing. Yes.
Yep. That's what we're trying to reach. The wine moms.
That's what we're trying to reach too.
I mean,
no, I would say, kind of going back to the point of people who are looking for authenticity. That would be basically our main audience is just people.
Yeah, I mean that would be the simplest way to do it. I was going to break it into two categories, but to sum it up into one, I think that's the best way to put it. Is people that are looking for authenticity. Yeah, cool. I mean, there's I was going to say on the philosophical end, so like maybe the people that are looking for the authenticity and to be challenged in their thinking and feeling. and then musically, like people kind of filling that thing with and this is more my personal thing, I think, than you, but I kind of feel like a lot of rock music, like I feel like a lot of rock has been kind of parted out, to where there's like indie rock that's got the pop sensibility, but it's more about soundscapes and kind of washed out, and some of that stuff's cool. It's like, no disrespect for that, but then there's the other end of like all the subgenres of metal, and then there's like nothing in between, and then there's almost like there's no blues influence on either of those camps either. So on a musical tip, like that's something that I'm trying to on at least my side of things, what I do musically, I'm trying to like reconnect rock and blues in a way that's relevant today, to where it's not necessarily like a hokey like tribute band, like throwback to a classic rock band, but in a more modern sense, like reconnect like blues and like the blues soul connection to rock, but also have something that's like aggressive, like for me that I miss, like when I was growing up, there were songs on the radio, through the 90s and the early 2000s where it was like you could sing along to it and you could headbang to it. It was aggressive enough to where it was like, this is really rock, and this is energetic, this is cool, but also it had it had a melodic song structure, so you could sing along with it. Where I feel like a lot of that's like parted out, where if you want to sing along with something, it's not gonna get you moving the same way of like metal, where the metal stuff will get you moving, but it's like you're not singing along with that.
Right.
So I'm trying to find that, like musically trying to find that middle ground for people that, and it's kind of like the I guess I get, the thing of like there must be more people out there that are like craving that in between.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like musically we kind of have a lot of the same mindsets that we do, I guess you could say philosophically, where we don't, kind of like challenging ideas or limitations again, where it's just like, because people are really into like the subgenres and stuff, and especially a lot of them gatekeeping that kind of stuff. And so like, to me, the way that I've always looked at music, because I've pretty much my entire life I've always listened to like every genre. I mean, like I grew up with my mom listening to like opera and Celine Dion and like and Elvis Presley, and then my dad would listen to like Spanish music and pop stuff, and like, and he would play jazz and that kind of stuff. He was a jazz saxophonist, and so like I kind of already was exposed to a bunch of stuff, and then eventually got into rock. But I never really, the idea of genres kind of always has bothered me, because it's just like, well, like why are there rules that you have to write a song that specifically fits in this genre? Like, why can't you take elements from different genres and create a song?
Right.
And so like there's a funny situation where we were at this metalcore show, and there was this one band that was really good, and we were talking to him afterwards, and we are like, oh, do you ever do like mixed genre shows? Because that's normally what we do. We'll have like a rapper and an indie artist or whatever. And he was like, oh yeah, like this was a mixed genre, so we had like mathcore and all these different cores, and I'm like, that's not what we meant.
Splint hairs.
There's a part in Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke. I don't know if you guys ever seen any of those old Cheech and Chong movies, but there's a part where Cheech meets Chong, and it's and Chong says, oh, hey man, are you in a band? You play music? He goes, yeah man, we play out my band, we play all kinds of stuff, everything from Santana to El Chicano. It's just like I'm seeing an interesting parallel there, like musically as well as philosophically, of sort of like, we're not going to take like the easy simplistic route of like, okay, we're cookie cutter this, or we're that. It's like, no, we're into like the gray areas, and we like to kind of blend things and question things and mix and match things to see what we come up with. It seems like that's kind of reflected in your music, but also just sort of like your general philosophy, or just sort of like, your outlook on politics and society.
Yeah.
Am I pulling that out of my ass, or am I getting pretty close?
That's completely correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I use it. I know you use it there about the people looking for. I think I would sum it up on all ends of what we're doing. The people that are wanting authenticity. Because even too, that was even the decision to the two piece. It's like I know lots of 2-piece bands that do run tracks, and it works for them.
Right.
But like even her, in 2018, like with Tiff, was like, I was like, yeah, I could lay down the guitar tracks, we could play along to them live shows, and she was like, no, and even though I had seen most people do that, like when she said that resonated with me. I was like, yeah, I'm like, this is going to be harder, but or less conventional to do it this way, but
right.
And I'm glad that we don't. So even like when we're tracking our stuff, I've been very mindful to like hit that balance of producing it, because we're self-produced, probably for the next, I don't know, it'll be for a while. We'll be self-produced for a while, but like striking that balance to where the stuff that we record is full enough sounding to to stand up to repeated listenings and do it justice as a recording, but also be able to pull that off live without having this huge like jump in quality, where like it sounds all huge and full and a bunch of layers on your recording, and then when you go play a show, it's like sounds thin and hollow and lifeless.
Right.
So we don't, we don't want that either. So we're striking that balance of like even production techniques and stuff of keeping things polished, but still raw. Still have this raw thing to where like if you were to catch us do it live, it's not gonna be a quality difference live to listening to the album version. Just the live version will just be tweaked, for live performance and a moment with that particular audience, but as far as the actual quality of performance, we want to keep that consistent and to honor that aspect of authenticity.
Right. Well, Tiff, good on you for putting your cosplay foot down and declaring no tracks, just keeping it just you two. So real quick, I do want to talk about that. So do you ever kind of blend music and your cosplay? You're very talented costume. We did the Nicki Minaj thing too, didn't you?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
that was a blend actually. That
that put both those skills right in there.
Yeah, I mean, like for live shows and stuff like that, I'll sometimes wear like crazy colored contacts or occasionally wear a wig or stuff like that, just because we do like to look kind of fun. With our stuff, it's kind of funny because our lyrics are definitely more serious, but like as far as our stage presence and our talking and or even the way we dress, it's a little bit more like fun. So like I don't know if you've seen pictures, but like my drum kit has a panda face on it. So yeah, we try to like blend the two things. Yeah. But yeah, we've definitely talked about like potentially getting into a little bit of the cosplay scene. I mean, now with 2020, 2021, we don't know how much we're gonna be able to do that because unfortunately a lot of the cosplay world is very woke. But
I hate to see it.
Yeah. We were supposed to go to a con in February, and I just found out yesterday that we're not gonna be able to go because they just announced that they're only gonna allow vaccinated.
Where is that?
In Maryland, Katsucon. Yeah, it's a pretty big con, and like they last minute announce this because it's like a month away. So like a bunch of
Mhm.
people who bought tickets now have to like get refunds and stuff like that. Yeah, but it was already like bad enough, like kind of having to deal with like the woke stuff, because like a group of our friends that are we called it the free speech room, because we purposely made it a point to like get a group of friends who were into like free speech and stuff like that, like because that's hard to find in that world. And so, like, unfortunately, a lot of us are just like, okay, guess we're not going now. Like,
Yeah.
Well, only would have been like 3 of you. I mean, it's like, I mean, like, isn't it ironic that creative people aren't fighting for free speech as much? Like, I mean, first of all, like the left traditionally, up until recently, was always in favor of free speech, and it's also like, don't you want the freedom to like, push the boundaries and upset people a little bit? Like, don't you want that freedom? But now it's like, no, like we shouldn't do that because it's impolite, it's problematic, it's toxic, and it's like, it's ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's weird how it's funny how it's like when the shoe's on the other foot, it's like crickets. There was it's weird because I thought it really applies nowadays too, was the band Census Fail. What's the song's called? I think it's Gold Jacket, Green Jacket. And they're talking about like there's one line that says it's like a satire, like sarcastic thing. They're saying the hook is like, because you got to defend yourself from anyone who doesn't think the same. And they were talking about like the Iraq wars and all that, and like that side of it, and they were speaking out against it. But I'm listening to these lyrics, I'm like, oh my goodness, this totally applies today. Like it's still, but just switch the parties, the party lines, and it perfectly applies. I'm like, but it makes me wonder if they've done that in their minds. They're not. Yes, I'm gonna say that they probably not, but it's interesting. It's like, wow, the very thing that we, the left wingers were calling out, the neocon Republican types on just 15 years ago now are, they're literally doing the exact same thing. And it's like, it's weird, it's really odd to me.
There's a word for it. It's called being hypocrite.
It's
called being hypocritical.
It's just so it's like it's
word
at
for
a
that.
blatant level. I didn't, I wouldn't expect it to be that.
Well, it goes back to like the question earlier. It's like, do they actually believe in that stuff, or is it just the hip thing to do at the time?
Hopping on the bandwagon.
We should probably start wrapping up soon, but before we do, can you tell our listeners, all 3 of them, who so can you give us talk to us real quick about like what are some upcoming projects, some things for our audience to look forward to?
Yeah, so we actually have 2 albums in the works right now.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Is it gonna be a 2-album release, or are you gonna release it like separately, or
we're gonna release them separately? Yeah.
You got to make that money.
They're kind of hopefully at least just a little bit. So they're kind of 2 separate paths. So before the lockdown and all this stuff, we had I had a concept even before the band, and I've been tossing it around. And there's a song that is like a title, I guess it would be like the title track, called Humanitis. It was like a word I made up. Itis usually means like an inflammatory condition. So it's basically talking about the human condition getting the better of us. So that turned into kind of like a concept thing, and they would just turn into an ongoing thing. The more going through life, learning about myself, the more we were tossing ideas around and stuff. So we kind of have that stuff, which is, I would say, apolitical for the most part, more dealing with individual humanity on an individual level. So there was that. And then we came up with this other concept because we started 2020, we just started writing stuff that's very more social political. And then we're batting around the idea of like titling that one called Another Canary in the Coal Mine. So it'd be kind of like 2 separate, kind of 2 separate paths and themes for that.
Very cool. And you know when that those will be released?
So Humanitis, we will be working on this year. And we should be releasing it this year, and then
Cool.
probably the other one will probably be just the following year. And then we also have a couple singles that we'll be releasing as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, so the 2 singles that are kind of like standalone.
Right.
We just didn't. They kind of just were their own thing. So those 2 will probably be out first.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, so pretty much all the main social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's all /Ignation Band. You can find us on Spotify and all the main music streaming. We have our old EP on there right now. And you can just search Ignation. And then when we release the new albums, they'll be on there as well. You can find us at Bandcamp if you search Ignation. And there's a few singles that are on there as well as the EP. I'm trying to think of, we are on a few alt tech sites. We have a locals page,
Cool.
and we did make a band page on Getter. So
All right. Well, we'll put all of those in the description. So
Yeah.
send them to the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Ignation Band link tree. So
Oh yeah, I
just
saw
make
that
it
okay.
actually. I also use
Excellent.
Linktree. Linktree's
Yeah.
great. So yes,
Yeah.
that's it's done for you.
Then you can grab whatever your preference from there.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys very much for coming on the podcast, and let's do this again sometime. Maybe we'll come back in a few
Yeah.
months, and we'll see where the culture's at and what's going on, and what are some projects you guys are working on as well. And yeah, thanks again for coming on, you guys.
And
Thank you for having us.
Ignation, you stay reckless, and you stay reckless too, Joe.
Oh, me too. Okay.
Me too.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.